A mechanic with 22 years of experience, a shop full of $40,000 worth of diagnostic tools, and a truck sitting on his lift that he is not allowed to fix. That is not a skills problem. That is not a parts problem. That is a permissions problem, and it is happening in truck shops across the country right now. Mike Delaney runs a diesel repair shop outside Mansfield, Ohio. 22 years turning wrenches, ASE certified in 8 categories. He can rebuild a fuel injection pump blind. But once a month, sometimes twice, he has to tell a customer the same sentence. I got it 80% of the way there. The rest, you have to take to the dealer. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly who built that wall, why they built it, and how much it is costing the trucking industry every single year. And what Mike told me next is the reason this video exists. Independent shops now forward as many as 5 vehicles a month to dealerships for work they are fully capable of doing themselves. Not because they lack the skill, but because the truck's own computer will not let them finish the job. Across the country, that adds up to hundreds of thousands of jobs redirected every year at a cost that lands on the fleet owner, the farmer, the small business running one truck. Independent shop signage in small towns, contrasted with a corporate dealership service lane. Mike's decision point came on a Tuesday afternoon in March. A regular customer, a local hauling outfit running 3 trucks, brought in a rig throwing an SCR fault code. Mike diagnosed it in 20 minutes, a sensor issue, not a catastrophic one. He replaced the part. The truck ran fine. But the fault code itself, the digital flag inside the truck's emissions computer, would not clear. Not because the repair failed, because his scan tool did not have the manufacturer's authorization to reset it. He called the dealer. They were backed up 6 weeks. The truck sat. That 6-week wait was not a scheduling accident. It was the predictable result of a system. Truck manufacturers control the software gate that sits between a diagnostic scan and a finished repair. And every independent shop in America has to go through it, on the manufacturer's terms, on the manufacturer's schedule. The system was not built out of malice. It was built out of structure. Manufacturers own the diagnostic protocol, the security modules, and the subscription pipeline that unlocks them. Independent shops buy access to pieces of that pipeline, one manufacturer at a time, one subscription at a time. It is not a conspiracy. It is an architecture, and architecture shapes who wins. But this is only the surface layer. To understand how a 20-minute repair turned into a 6-week wait, you have to go back to how diesel trucks became rolling computers in the first place. The 1550 and 30 in the 1990s, diesel engines ran almost entirely mechanical. A skilled mechanic with hand tools could diagnose and repair nearly anything under the hood. Then emissions regulation tightened. Engines needed electronic control to hit new EPA standards. Manufacturers added sensors, then modules, then software layers stacked on top of those modules to manage everything from fuel timing to exhaust treatment. Each new layer needed a way to be read, adjusted, and reset. Manufacturers built proprietary tools to do that, tools that only their own dealer networks had full access to. 2 words: total control. At first, that control was framed as a safety measure. Keep unqualified hands out of emissions systems. And in the early 2000s, that reasoning held up. But the technology kept advancing. Trucks today run 10 or more onboard computer modules, monitoring upward of 200 parameters through more than 50 sensors. The complexity multiplied. The access did not. In 2014, aftermarket groups and manufacturers signed an agreement covering diagnostic data for light vehicles. A second agreement followed in 2015 for trucks over 14,000 pounds. Both were meant to guarantee independent shops a path to the same repair information dealers had. Both left enormous gaps. Module programming, security-gated systems, and code-clearing authorities stayed locked behind manufacturer portals. New parts, old weight. Massachusetts voters tried to force the issue. In 2020, they passed a law by wide margin requiring manufacturers to give independent shops standardized access to vehicle telematics data. The auto industry's own lobbying group sued before the law could take effect. A federal judge blocked enforcement. As of this year, that case is still working through the courts, meaning shops in Massachusetts still do not have the access voters approved nearly 6 years ago. Not blocked by technology, blocked by litigation. But here's what most people get wrong. Here is the number that changes how you see this entire system. Dealer repair costs run on average 36% higher than the same job at an independent shop. Not because dealer technicians are more skilled, because dealers control the pipeline, and control has a price. Break that down into labor. Dealership labor rates run $150 to $250 an hour, depending on the brand and the metro area. Independent shop labor runs $90 to $150 an hour. On a repair that takes 8 hours, not unusual for a major diesel job, that gap alone can exceed $800. That is more than many hourly workers in this country take home in a full week. Now add parts. Dealerships sell OEM parts at full manufacturer list price, after buying them at 30 to 40% below that list price from the manufacturer itself. A $200 part costs the dealer somewhere between $120 and $140. The rest is margin, built into a system where the dealer is often the only legal path to finish the job. Then there is the diagnostic layer itself, and this is where the real cost hides. A basic diesel diagnostic scan runs $100 to $250 at an independent shop. The same scan at a dealership runs $200 to $500, more than double, for reading the same fault codes off the same truck. This is where the earlier lock resolves. Remember the truck stuck for 6 weeks over a code that would not clear? That is not a one-off. The National Automotive Service Task Force, an industry mediator with nearly 60,000 members, receives around 140 access dispute requests a year just to get manufacturers to unlock diagnostic data for independent shops. Even when it works, and it resolves those disputes roughly 90% of the time, the fallback option for an unresolved code often costs a shop $100 to $150 per scan, just to pay someone else to do what they are already qualified to do. Graphics showing a dollar amount ticking upward as diagnostic layers stack: labor, parts, subscription, per scan fee. Now here is the counterintuitive turn. You would assume the dealer premium buys better repair quality. It does not in most cases. Consumer research consistently shows independent shops score higher than dealerships on customer satisfaction and trust. The premium does not buy skill. It buys access. Access to a locked system that only the manufacturer controls the key to. One more thing is still coming: the number that shows how much shops are spending just to stay in the game at all. Some independent shops now spend $1,500 or more on aftermarket diagnostic tool subscriptions just to break even against sending 5 trucks a month to the dealer. That is not a repair cost. That is the cost of admission, a toll paid before the wrench ever touches the truck. If you have ever sat in a service bay and felt like the mechanic wasn't being straight with you when he said, "We have to send this to the dealer," you were not imagining things. You were watching a structural bottleneck play out in real time, and nobody in the room had the authority to explain it to you. Slow push-in on a technician's face, tired, checking a clock on the shop wall. Here is what most people never realize. The technician working on your truck is very often not the reason for the delay. He passed his certifications. He owns tools that cost more than some people's trucks. What he does not own is the software key that manufacturers built specifically to keep that decision out of his hands. That is the identity shift this video is built around. The independent mechanic is not the weak link in American trucking. He is operating inside a system engineered deliberately to make him look like one, while directing the highest margin work back toward a smaller, more controlled network. Federal legislation exists to fix this. It is called the Repair Act, and it has been introduced in Congress multiple times, aiming to guarantee independent shops the same diagnostic tools, data, and parts access that dealer networks already have. As of this year, it has not passed. The gap it is meant to close is the same gap Mike Delaney ran into on a Tuesday afternoon in Ohio. That is what happened to the truck that sat for 6 weeks, and it is why the fault code that Mike's tool couldn't clear was never a technical failure. It was a business decision, made somewhere far from that repair bay. Understanding this puts you ahead of almost everyone who has ever paid a dealer invoice without asking why the number was so much higher. You now know the difference between a repair that costs more because it required more skill and a repair that costs more because a manufacturer built a locked door and charged rent on the only key. Which brings us to what happens next. Every fleet, every farm, Every family that could not afford dealer prices has relied on independent shops for generations. Losing that capacity does not just hurt shop owners and technicians, it hurts every vehicle owner who does not live near a dealer or cannot pay dealer rates. Mike closing the hood of a truck at dusk, shop lights on behind him. The next time your mechanic says the words, "We have to send this to the dealer," you will know exactly what stands between him and finishing the job, and exactly who built that wall, one software module at a time.